Welcome to the Buffy Effect, Teen Heroines Then and Now. My name is Sarah Kuhn. I'll be your moderator. I'm the author of the trilogy Heroine Complex, which is coming out next year from Daw Books. And I also wrote the geek rom-com novella One Con Glory. But before I did all that, I reviewed every single episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer for IGN. And I still get emails about that. So clearly she has a very lasting legacy, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So to start off, I wanted to ask all of our amazing panelists to briefly introduce themselves. And I thought maybe this could be illuminating to say which Buffy character is your favorite. And I'll go first. Mine's Anya.
Hi guys, I'm Brittany Geragotelis, and I am the author of the Life's a Witch series. And my favorite character is Buffy. But I also like Faith. So I like the dark and the light there.
My name is Valerie Tejeda. I'm the author of the upcoming book Hollywood Witch Hunter. My favorite character is Buffy, I have to say, and then second would be Willow.
Hi, I'm Kiersten White. I'm the author of the Paranormal trilogy, the Mind Game series, the Cats of Stars, Illusions of Fate, and In the Shadows. That's all of them. My favorite Buffy character has to be Tara, because a couple years ago, I was on a panel with Amber Benson, and she snuggled into my shoulder, and I was like, "Oh, Willow, I understand."
I'm Rae Carson. I'm the author of the Girl of Fire and Thorns fantasy trilogy and the upcoming Walk on Earth: A Stranger. And my favorite character is Spike.
Hi, I'm Rachel Hawkins. I'm the author of the Hex Hall series and the Rebel Bell series. And my favorite character is probably also Spike, I have to say. So I'm gonna go with you, Rae.
That's a love for Spike. All right, so I thought we'd start with a general question and then sort of move into specifics, and feel free to jump in any place you want to answer. We don't have to go down the line. But in the panel description, we say that Buffy revolutionized the paradigm of the teen heroine, and I think that's definitely true. I think everybody here thinks that's true. And I was wondering if you guys could talk about why do we think she was so remarkable, and how do we see her influence sort of throughout pop culture?
All right, I'll tackle that first. I know that for me, the thing that I loved the most about Buffy was that, like, she's obviously incredibly kick-ass, which is great. We're all here for kick-ass girls. But she was also very much allowed to be vulnerable and to be girly. That those things were fine too. That those things didn't have to be mutually exclusive, I think, is really like a revolutionary and great thing. I always point out that, like, one of my favorite Buffy moments is the after Angel has gone evil and all of that, and she's been so, like, fierce about, like, dealing with that, like, this has happened and we've got to get to the next thing. And then there's that scene where you see her in her bedroom holding the ring that he gave her and just breaking down and crying. And I was like, that's such a great juxtaposition that we get that you can be both. You can sort of get stuff done and understand that there's evil that must be fought, but you can still cry over a boy in your bedroom, and it doesn't weaken you in any way.
I think, too, the depth of the storytelling and sort of the levels that there were, because, we write YA, and a lot of times, if you talk to adults and you say you write for teens, they're like, "Oh, that's nice." And there's kind of this sort of unspoken head pat, which as a short person I get a lot. Oh, I will hit you. And what I loved about Buffy is, yes, it is about a blonde teenage girl who kills vampires, but it also has some of the most, like, stunning storytelling, like the body episode. Yeah. I mean, I get chills just saying the title of that episode. It was some of the most, like, harrowing, impactful television I've ever seen. And I think that is, to me, what stood out the most about that storytelling is it was funny, it had action, it was kick butt, but it also told some incredible, very, very real human stories. It just used that supernatural tone to tell them. And that, for me, was very, very inspiring. And that's what I've tried to do in all of my books, is when I use supernatural elements, I try to use them to amplify the human experience, not take away from it, but to make it more human rather than less.
And when Buffy first came about, like, really, we didn't have a whole lot of really, really strong female role models, at least on television. You had, Xena, and you had in the X-Files, you had Scully, but there was nothing for teenagers. Which, hello, like we're at the height of our emotional state when we're at teenagers. Everything is heightened. And so Buffy came around, and she was this girl who could take care of herself. She didn't need a man to take care of her. In fact, most of the time she saved them. And it was just, I think that it was the first time that we were able to see, like, as women, that we are strong too, and we can take care of ourselves, and also that they're important. Like, for the first time, like, really, it was like, hey, here's this teenager, and yes, she does kill vampires, and she's blonde, and she wants to be a cheerleader and everything, but she's really, really important to the world, more so than any of the guys that we've seen on the show, and that was incredible as a young woman to feel that empowerment.
I loved how ensemble the cast was. And to me, that is such an important reflection of the high school experience. There's a wish fulfillment factor there of she's completely kick-ass. She saves the world. She's large and in charge. She's in charge of her group of friends. She's the one in the power position, but she's not alone. And when you're a teenager, seeing that is really important, the way the friends help each other out. There was this wish fulfillment element for me of being part of a community, being part of this team that could get stuff done and save the world. And I loved that. I have a quick question for you all. How many of you watched Buffy when it first came out? Okay, cool. How many of you discovered it afterward? Interesting. How many of you discovered it like in the last couple of years? So that just to me, that's kind of how I suspected it would turn out. But that's just really interesting to me that it's a show with such power that it continues to gain fans over time. And it doesn't, I mean, the hair and the clothes might be a little outdated. I thought they were awesome when I watched it for the first time. But it's just amazing the staying power that this show has. And I think one of the reasons is because it captures that teen experience in a way that's not at all condescending. And I know Joss Whedon and some of the other writers often talk about how the Hellmouth was this metaphor for high school. High school is hell, you know? And I think that resonated with teens too. Up until that point, I don't think teens had something that like got their experience in such a profound way.
I think for me it was kind of like what Brittany said. I think just being able to see this girl who was the chosen one, you know, and she didn't need a man to save her, she was saving them. I think watching that at a young age was just kind of like, wow, you know, you can, like, I can do whatever. I mean, obviously I'm not gonna go slay vampires, but just that idea that, you know, you can do that on your own, and to have that kind of power in a young girl, I think was just so revolutionary. And obviously has staying power because we're all still talking about it, so it's pretty amazing.
So to go kind of from the general to the specific, you are all creators of kick-ass teenage heroines as well as being inspired by Buffy. So I wanted to ask, how did you sort of take that inspiration back to your work? How do you think it kind of influenced your own writing?
Well, I have a blonde main character who attacks vampires and is really snarky. I did not deliberately rewrite Buffy, but it had just lodged so permanently in my subconscious. It wasn't until I was describing the plot of Paranormalcy to my friend, she was like, "So Buffy," and I was like, "Oh man." But vampires aren't attractive, so right? No, but like hugely, hugely influential, obviously, especially on my first series, because I loved that they pulled in all sorts of mythology. They started out pretty vampire specific, but then they really branched out, and I loved that idea of the supernatural living just to the right of the natural, and trying to maintain a teen life while also having to deal with all of that. So, I mean, that's basically my series. Yeah. She's not the chosen one. No, like I didn't rip off Buffy, but if you read Paranormalcy, you will see its influence throughout.
Yeah, I think for me too, I was definitely really influenced by Buffy. I love that idea of just paranormal things happening in a normal world. For my book, I picked Hollywood and made that, kind of all crazy. But I think that for me, I didn't even necessarily mean to make her like Buffy, but I think like what she said, is just like when you're such a fan of her and she just influenced you so much, it just kind of came out in a way, you know?
I'll also say that's part of the reason I love creating content for teens, because the things that really impact you as a teen impact you, I think, stronger than anything you're exposed to as an adult. Because I have loved things as an adult, but nothing lodges as deeply or as powerfully as the things that you love as a teen, I think.
Absolutely.
For me, Buffy was the first time that I realized, I mean, I grew up a huge book nerd, reading everything. I loved it. I loved writing. I loved books. But watching Buffy was the first time that I realized that storytelling could change someone's life. And so for me, even though, you know, it's a television show, it was still written by Joss and his fantastic writers. It's just storytelling in a different medium. And so that was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, because Buffy impacted me so like deeply that it changed like the way that I looked at the world. It changed kind of like, it made me think about what my purpose was. And it made me search for, I wanted so badly to impact the world in a positive way. Because that's what Buffy did. She impacted the world positively. You know, she saved the world a lot. And but it's like there was no doubt that her time on Earth was important. And I think that from deep down, like that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know that I was here for a reason, and that I was impacting the world around me in a positive way. And so because I was so like struck by that, it was what I gravitated towards. Everything after that was like, okay, where's the next strong female? You know, I loved Dark Angel. I loved Alias. And then that led into Veronica Mars. So it's like, it's what I gravitated towards. So of course, what I'm gonna write about is stuff that I'm passionate about. And so that is of course going to be kick-ass females who are slightly damaged. As I think most of us are, but and that's what really drove me. So that's what has bled into my Life's a Witch series, as well as a couple of my other books. But it's what I love, so it would make sense that that's what we would write.
I learned that from Buffy that it's okay, even desirable, to kill really important characters. Yeah.
It is not desirable, and you stop it right now.
So if you read my books, you know, you've been warned. No, it can be such a powerful storytelling tool. And I just remember like, okay, spoilers. I think we have to agree that in this panel, we're just gonna have to
Yeah, it's been over for a while,
Yeah,
I think.
so it's been over for a while. Jenny Calendar, I bawled. The end of season 2 with Angel, I bawled. With Tara, I bawled, you know, and it was just so powerful. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just how it made me feel. It was how the other characters reacted and how they grew and changed from it. There isn't gratuitous death in the Buffy series. Everything leads to something else. Everything pushes everyone else in really interesting ways. And that to me is a fabulous storytelling technique that I wanted to master, so I tried it a lot.
I think for me, I think that Buffy is a huge reason why I write YA. I am one of those people that came to it a little bit later. It was on when I was in high school, and my best friend was obsessed with it, but it was originally on the WB, right? And we didn't get the WB at my house, which, you know, when I was 16, 17 was a tragedy of a great scale. Everybody's watching that in Dawson. I can't. There's no Dawson for me. So I came to it after I was already an adult and I was teaching high school. Which is actually a hellmouth. That is very true. I'm here to tell you. There's a reason I'm writing for teenagers now and not teaching them anymore. But with Buffy, when I was watching it, I too, like as everyone has said, I was really blown away by the storytelling, that it was just that you could tell these very big stories about growing up, about friendship, about love, by using these supernatural elements, I thought was just such a genius idea. I think the reason the show works so well, the reason we still talk about it, is because while it did have all these supernatural elements, like Rae was saying, it's very human. at the end of the day. And to me, that was just so appealing, the idea of telling stories about teenagers and growing up and finding your own path while telling it on this sort of operatic, you know, oh, the world is ending. Because when you're a teenager, the world does feel like it's ending pretty much all the time. And I think that that's had a huge impact. And also, again, I've enjoyed writing girls who are tough and who sometimes have incredibly great responsibility placed on their shoulders. I definitely think my latest series, Rebel Belle, is my homage to Buffy, because it's a girl who becomes like a knight who has to protect a boy who can see the future. And I had so much fun playing with that idea too, of like when you have these great responsibilities, but do those responsibilities outweigh the responsibilities to your friends and your family? Like, how do you balance, like, I must save the world with like, yeah, but my mom's gonna be really worried if I'm out like past like 10:30. And so I definitely think that that's been a big influence on me. Yeah.
That's actually something else I kind of wanted to discuss a little more in depth, which is one of the things I loved about Buffy was this sort of ability to mix the very fantastical with the mundane, with the sort of teenage life of, I have to save the world, but I would really like to be asked to the prom. As writers, I wanted to ask, how do you have these characters with fantastical abilities or in fantastical situations and still keep the work very real and grounded?
Well, I think deep down, like, all of the characters are human. And so we have, our normal human needs, which is, love, companionship, fear, which drives us. But all these, like, natural reactions, because they are human, even if they are supernatural, in some respect, they're still teenage girls. And I think that everybody kind of looks at their lives as, we've got this little bubble that we're in. And so, the most world-ending type thing could be that you have no friends at school. Like, and it's a very real, like, emotional place to be, especially in high school. But so I think it's really easy to blend these seemingly mundane, when you put it in the perspective of saving the world, things, because it's all human emotions that we're talking about. But I liked that. I think that that's realistic. I think it's realistic to, know that you need to go save the world, but you also have a crush on this boy. Like, I think that it's just normal.
I think for me, the saving the world part is probably easier to write, and kind of making the character human is a little more challenging, because I think, as a writer, it's easy to get caught up in kind of that fun side of the story, like, like the girl in my book is hunting witches, so she's hunting witches, and that's really exciting, but she also kind of has a crush on a boy, so just balancing those feelings, and she's so young, she's only 16, so keeping that in mind as well, I think for me was a bit of a challenge when I first started writing that, and then as I continued to work on it, it kind of all like melded together perfectly. But I think at first it kind of was a bit of a challenge. So for you, it wasn't, to kind of keep them.
Well, just because I'm an emotional basket case, apparently, and that's what I talk about, is like all of those feelings coming up, because even when you have priorities and you have things that are bigger on the level, like, it might not feel that way.
Yeah.
There's a moment in my first book, Paranormalcy, where she's been through all this trauma and terrible things are happening, and someone has just died. I look at Rae. Nothing as bad as Ray's stuff.
It was pretty bad, Kiersten. That one was
It was.
pretty
Actually, I have had librarians yell at me
bad.
about that one.
We're not letting you off the hook for that
Yeah.
one. No.
Anyway, and so she's finally like in this calm afterward, and she's at this boy that she likes they've run off and they're safe, and she has this moment where she's changing, and she realizes she hasn't shaved her legs, and she has this moment of, oh crap, I'm with this cute boy and I'm putting on shorts and my legs are hairy, and then she just sort of has this breakdown, laughing, crying that all of this horrible, terrible stuff has happened, and she's like, oh, I have hairy legs. And actually, I had somebody ask me once if that was like some deep-seated fear of mine, and I was like, no, oh, wait, that is actually a recurring nightmare that I have, that I am out in public, and I realize my legs are super hairy. I have shaved today, in case any of you are wondering. Yes, this morning.
She has, I can see.
She's been rubbing my leg under the table. I'm sorry, Ray. You should never sit by me in a panel. But I think those moments of the just allowing your characters to have very, very human moments. It was like you were saying, that the Buffy holding the ring and sobbing, Willow's meltdown over not being able to find the shirt that she wanted to wear when they have to go to the hospital after a death. Like those very, very human moments, those things that we get stuck on, I think can stand for so much. You can have so much supernatural nonsense going on. If you have those touchstones, those things that we as humans can automatically relate to, then I think you can get away with so much else.
I think Buffy did that so well. The beautiful moment of weakness. And sometimes they played it for laughs, like when Buffy's having to go to her first parent-teacher conference with Dawn, and she's hyper competent, and she's always punning as she's, stabbing vampires in the heart. And she gets to this parent-teacher conference, and she just can't say a single thing right, because this is not her. It's not her area of expertise. It's not her area of confidence. And I think it's important to find those vulnerabilities in characters to make them human. And it's interesting, too, because people have different empathy triggers. So my husband and I watched that scene together, and I was like, oh, that poor girl. She has no idea what she's doing in the parent-teacher conference. And my husband was so frustrated with her. Like, she's so competent. Why is she such a blubbering idiot now, But by pulling in these different moments of weaknesses, you actually hook different potential audience members. And so I had that very much in mind when I wrote my first book, The Girl of Fire and Thorns. My protagonist, Elisa, starts off with a horrible self-esteem. She's really self-conscious, and she's the chosen one, but everyone's like, yeah, you are the chosen one, ha, ha, ha. But I had that very much in mind. I guess that's another influence from Buffy, just how vulnerable the characters are and how much you ended up empathizing with this girl who could kick my butt any day. And I was just empathizing with her so much. And if you can pull that empathy from your audience, I think you end up with the winner of a story.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that it's always so important when you're creating something to remember that, like, if people don't care about the characters, it doesn't matter how amazing your world building is or how scary your monsters are, no one's going to care. And so it's remembering that they're real people, and especially like real teenagers. I'm sure all of us who've written about teenagers have gotten those things where people are like, oh, I really hate when your character made a bad decision. And you're like, well, yes, she is 16. I'm so glad you were obviously a paragon of reason at 16, other person, but I was not. And remembering that, even though sometimes it makes it frustrating when you're like, oh, but you're doing the thing. That's exactly how I write, by the way, when I'm like, oh, I'm not doing the thing. And so I think, yeah, exactly, if you keep that in mind, that they're human, because nobody wants to read about, I think now, especially these days, like, we've really been trained to expect our superheroes to be incredibly fallible human beings. We really like that. And it's sort of like making its way like into all media, like how there's this whole like trend now of shows of like women so good at jobs, so bad at everything else. So it's that they've gone a little heavy on that. Like, we can ease up on that some. I'm a disaster at everything. I think that's but no, I think that I definitely think, yeah, if you just kind of keep remembering that they're human, that they're real people, and that's going to make all the supernatural elements actually seem so much stronger because they're going to feel very much grounded in a real place.
And something else that came up a little earlier was that Buffy also had such a great supporting cast and such a great sort of rich world for that heroine to play off of. So I was wondering if you guys could talk about, as writers, how do you sort of build the world around the heroine? How do you build that great cast of supporting characters? How do you build that deep world that leads to so many great stories?
How do you? Because I'm writing a second book right now, and wow, how do you?
Anyone have any tips for that?
So we'll open that up to the audience. You guys want to tell us? That'd be great.
Or maybe is there anything from Buffy's supporting cast that influenced your supporting cast? Is there anything you took from
I
there?
will say I actually really liked doing the supporting cast part of writing. For me, that was just so much fun to have this main character and then to build some characters around her. I think for my character in particular, she's a witch hunter, but she ends up she ends up being a little more friends with the witches. And so I think that was kind of fun too, to kind of have her get this supporting group of people from a group you wouldn't expect. So that was really fun for me, just to kind of brainstorm and figure out, okay, who's going to be her support system, and then kind of do it a little differently. So I really enjoyed that process, honestly, but I know it can be a little challenging.
I think you also, the thing that Buffy did so well with the cast was balance. You had Buffy, who was so aggressive and so take charge, and then you had Willow, who starts out as very, very like soft, and she's an easy target, and she gradually comes into her own, but her strengths are still very different than Buffy's strengths. They very much complement each other. And then you had characters like Oz, who was a great character, but they finally hit a point where they didn't know what else to do with him, because there was no way for him to interact with the other characters in a way that made anybody grow. So they sent him, to bed. Like you do with your spare werewolves. I think that needs to happen very organically with supporting characters. They have to encourage what's good about your character, but also push for growth. In my most recent book, Illusions of Fate, there was another girl character who was originally going to be sort of a mean girl character, and I hate this about myself, I always tend to default to the mean girl to try and create tension, but it's a very sort of like cheap form of tension, because yes, girls do mean things to each other, but there is no such thing as a mean girl. Like, they're still people, and there are reasons they're acting that way, and which I think they explored so well with Cordelia, and then her growth, and she was still mean, but she was awesome mean, and you loved that character and the way that she grew, and it was kind of similar with this side character. As soon as she showed up on the page, it was like, no, she's not mean. She simply figured out the best way to survive in a very, very restrictive society. And so this is like the gossiping and the sort of social dealing, that's her currency, and that's how she survives in a very male-dominated world. And I think Buffy was such a good example of everybody is the way that they are for a reason, out of survival, and then they grow into not just surviving, but thriving with what they have.
Ensemble cast gives you the very best opportunities for humor because you have all the inside jokes, you have all the history. So what was that episode where Buffy starts hearing people's thoughts, remember? Yeah. And it was Earshot. What was it called? Earshot, thank you. So it starts off, she's hearing all these thoughts, and she hears the thought, and then she hears what comes out of people's mouths. And it's different, And then she gets to Cordy, and it's exactly the same. That was an amazing moment, but it was like years in the making. That moment of humor was years in the making, and it was because of these relationships and because of how ensemble the cast was that worked. So as writers, that ensemble gives us a chance to play off of each other and build relationships so that by the time I was in book 3 of my trilogy, I felt like I was writing fan fiction of my own work, Like, it's just, there's so many wonderful opportunities to explore those relationships and have those warm and humorous moments. And I think Buffy did that just so well.
Although you do have to be careful not to dilute it too much. Like, my biggest issue with season 7 was you had these characters that you've grown to love so much, and then they threw so many new characters at you that you knew, like, if you had some time with them, you might care, but at that point it was like, no, I don't care what that one chick with the face is doing. This is how I remember people, as opposed to a chick without a face. I don't know. I wanted to know about Buffy and Willow and Xander and Andrew, who was adorable. Like, he worked. But so I think that you do have to be careful as you progress in your book that every addition or every character again serves a purpose, and that you're not just throwing new people in to generate drama. That there's actually a reason for them all to be there.
Also, the supporting cast for me, especially on Buffy, but also in my books, is they tend to, like, the friends tend to be the only ones that can challenge your main character, can call them out on their stuff, and also they're the ones that keep you human. They're the ones that you're allowed to cry around. And you're allowed to make mistakes around because they are people that care about you. But I think that the biggest thing is, like, really, could anybody else have challenged Buffy? Like, if she had her mind set on something, nobody else could have gotten through to her except for her friends. Yeah. So really, I think it's that's really important as well, because it challenges our characters to be better people, to change when they need to be strong when they need to. So that's kind of how I look at them.
Yeah, and I think too, and we've sort of touched on this, that it's so important for teenagers that your friends are really such a huge part of your social life, and so Buffy had done that so well too, with also having just like people who could share her secret, which is very important when you have a superhero, that you've got the people who understand. And yeah, like Rae said, it gives you a chance for a little more humor. It also gives you a chance to explore all sorts of different dynamics. I always loved on Buffy the sort of relationships between, especially the first season and second season, with Buffy, Willow, and Xander, and how they all related to each other, and how Xander and Willow's relationship was so different from Buffy and Xander's relationship. But you were still very interested in Willow and Xander, and oh gosh, the one where at the end of the second season when Willow's in the hospital and Xander confesses his love over her unconscious body, even though Xander didn't deserve any of those ladies. That's the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, Xander, and then you rewatch and you're like, oh, Xander. We've all had a Xander in our lives. But still, you cared about that. That it lets you sort of let off a little bit of pressure off of your main character too. That there are other emotional relationships that you can invest in, which I really like.
I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of how we're evolving beyond Buffy in the new era of the teen heroines. So we've talked about how this show is obviously very revolutionary for its portrayal of women. I think it was revolutionary in sort of centering a gay couple in the narrative. One area that I thought was maybe a little bit missing is the cast was not very racially diverse. And I was wondering if we could talk about, do we feel like things are moving forward in that regard in terms of teen heroines, or have we made steps? Or
Well, I think for me personally, when I was watching Buffy, I'm part Mexican, and so I always thought, well, why am I not represented in these kinds of shows? So for me, when I wrote Hollywood Witch Hunter, it was very important to have a diverse cast. From my main character's Latina, and I have people from all walks of life. So I think that it's kind of moving forward, but I still think we got some work to do. But I'm definitely glad that I have a character with a little more flavor. But I don't know. I hope that it's going to move more that direction.
So a show that I love right now that I will get a little bit evangelical about is The 100.
Yes.
Okay, yes, what I love.
Everyone go watch that.
Yes, go binge it on Netflix. The third season starts next year, so you'll catch up, and then you can talk to me on Twitter, and I will freak out with you. Not that I'm ever on Twitter. But what I love about The 100 is it says, okay, we're a post-apocalyptic sci-fi show. Everything is on the table, and so what they decided to do was have a society of absolute gender equality where it is never, ever questioned that this girl shouldn't be the leader because she's a girl. They might question her leadership, but it never has anything to do with gender. The doctor's a woman. They took all of these traditional gender lines and they just blew them up with a nuclear bomb that took out the rest of the world. And I love that, and I love what they can do with storytelling by completely ignoring these roles that I think a lot of other shows feel like they sort of have to give lip service to. They don't. It's not even an issue. They pretend like it's never existed, and it's something that you can do when you're working with sci-fi. When you're working with these worlds that you're setting up on your own, why do you have to worry about these roles that we've always had? Just throw them out. So I love that they've done that, because in the older shows, you still see those things. You still see a little bit of the sexist storytelling. Buffy did a good job with it, but they all have their moments anyway. Huge plug for The 100. I love what they do with it.
So good.
Yeah, I was going to say with that too, I think it was really important for me to not make my characters stereotypical, to be racially diverse but not be that stereotypical. It's just who they are. It's not an issue at all, which was really important to me.
Because it's not an issue book. It's a fun supernatural book. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Hold that thought. A really important headspace for me to be in as a writer is how to love something passionately the way I do Buffy and still give myself permission to be highly critical of it at the same time. And I've learned that those two things can coexist in perfect harmony in my head and heart at the same time. And I do have some criticisms of Buffy, and probably the biggest one is the lack of diversity. This is something that took place ostensibly in a Southern California town. There's absolutely no excuse in the world to not have more racially diverse characters. So yeah, I have a Latina main protagonist and a much more racially diverse society. That's something I was really deliberate about, and that's something I'm going to continue to be deliberate about in my writing. To me, representation is not honorable or brave. It's just something that you do to achieve basic human decency, is representing people who actually exist in the world around you. And if I could change one thing about Buffy, it would be that.
Yeah, I think that we're definitely like moving forward, but maybe not as fast as we should be. I think that's kind of my take on it. We could do better, probably. We could do better.
Yeah, it's a slow crawl. I think it's going to take a lot of consumers when these racially diverse, I don't want to say products, but books, television shows, movies, magazines, like when these things come out, I think it's really going to take us, because everybody that's creating this stuff, maybe not the creative side, but the business side, they're looking at, not to get too much into it, but they're looking at money, they're looking at numbers. And so if people are consuming it, they're gonna make more of it. For me personally, I've always included people of different races in my book, and that's because I grew up around, it was a very colorful world that I grew up around, and so for me that's normal. And but it wasn't until recently I started getting people being like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for putting an African American as one of the main characters in the book." And I'm like, "Well, duh, like of course." But it's something that, you know, when you hear people saying, "I don't see myself represented, I can't identify with the characters," it's a huge wake-up call for me to be like, oh, like I didn't go into it being like, oh, I need to make a racially diverse cast. To me, that's just normal, but I think it does have a really long way to go. And that's going to also depend on you guys. Like, it's going to depend on consumers putting stuff out there.
And I mean, and there are some areas where you can definitely see leaps and bounds of improvement. For example, in Buffy, Joss really fought to get a same-sex kiss on screen. He had to slip it into the episode about somebody dying in order to get that, sort of under the censors. And now, I mean, there still is not the best representation, but there's more of it. And I found, like, in the book community, my next book coming out is a historical. It's called And They Darken. It comes out next year. And one of the two main characters is gay. And my editor never even blinked at it. It never came up. It was never like a, it was a non-issue, which to me was very, very heartening to see that that these things that, even 10 years ago, somebody had been like, oh, do we want that in a book for teens? Like, of course we want that in a book for teens. Like, of course we do. And so I think that we are making improvements, and that, as long as the creators, and then like you said, you vote for what you want with your money. So yeah, the media that you consume and the feedback that you give makes a difference.
Yeah.
I think we have some time for some audience questions. Do you guys have anything you
I have a
wanna
quick
ask?
question for the audience. Is that all right?
Oh, go ahead.
I want to know what your guys' favorite Buffy episode is.
Don't all answer at once. Hush.
Yeah?
I
Yeah?
think Hush is a big favorite.
Once more feeling. Any votes for Tabula Rasa? Yeah. Awesome. Pangs, that was good.
Oh, the wish.
There's a whole range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are probably my favorites.
I was going to say, Ray, I think it's really noble that if you could change anything about Buffy, you'd change the racial diversity and not the Riley.
Riley was very earnest and sweet. He just met the wrong girl.
I love how Riley had not come up at all until now. That says a lot about Riley.
Did we have to bring up Riley?
Never mentioned.
Yeah.
I think we had a question right here.
I'm just curious, picking up on the last topic before that question. You know when the Sony hacks were leaked, and we talked about with your pocketbook, leaving with your pocketbook, but if the properties never get off the ground because it's white men, studio executives, who say no one in the world wants to watch a female superhero, and they don't get it off the ground, or Kate Blanchett, Julianne Moore, when they've accepted their awards, they've talked about the fact that they're still earning a fraction of the pay. How and show that we have interest, because it's just not moving off the ground. And I think that's why, like, the Buffy comic book has continued. And I think that's why, all of your books have proliferated, fan fiction. Everyone has tried to create it themselves, because it's not being greenlit. But how do you think that can get over?
That's a really good point. Did you all hear that? Okay. I think the number one thing you can do is buy books that you love. Because I'll tell you what, they will let us write books about those things. And then if those books sell enough, then they get turned into movies like Divergent and Hunger Games, and they are showing Hollywood female protagonists kick butt at the box office. And that's how these books are getting made into movies. It's not because Hollywood execs are like, oh, let's have a teen female protagonist, because I guarantee you they're not. But those books sell so well, and they have such a huge audience, and people are paying with their pocketbooks, and then they get made into movies. How many of you would watch a Black Widow movie like tomorrow if it came out?
I'm not
Right?
I'm so excited.
I'm right there with you. I would go to the theater, I would watch it 3 times in a row. I would love to see that happen. But what we can do right now is buy books, and we can show them the kind of entertainment that we do want to see put into movies. There might be other ways, but I'm an author. That's the way I can think of.
There's also, you guys have power in yourself. This is the day and age of social media and making things happen. And so people are paying attention. If enough people are asking for something, your voice can be heard. And this is really a great time for that. Because, in the past, before social media and the internet being what it is, you didn't really. You could do letter writing campaigns, which is still great, and people still do that. But now it's it takes 5 seconds out of your day, to tweet something, to Facebook something, to take a picture of yourself reading, or take a picture of a book that you're reading that you really adore and put it on Instagram. Those kind of things take no time, they cost no money, and people are paying attention to that.
They are, yeah. No, I say the same thing. I always tell people, just because I have a diverse female character, I always say, you want to see more diverse female characters, support them. Even just tweeting about it if you don't have the funds to buy, that's fine. I think if people know that that's what you want, then you're more likely to get more of those down the road, definitely.
Right here.
With you guys all writing YA and how teenagers sort of interact with their parents, obviously that's a fertile sort of area to write about. In Buffy, you have all of these different sort of archetypes of parents, with George being so supportive, you have Giles as a surrogate father, and then you have absent dad. How do you guys handle parents with your supernatural females?
I have a lot of orphans. Just kidding. Actually, my first 2 series, they are orphans, but they have surrogate parents. And so, because you do need to have that push and pull with teenagers, I think that the greatest thing about writing about teenagers is that they are at a point where they can choose who they want to be, but they still have people telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing, which as an adult you don't have so much, and so that's a really great tension that you can explore. And then I do have a book that has parents that are alive, but they're immortal ancient Egyptian gods, so I couldn't kill them. But I think that push and pull, and like you said, you fill those roles even if you don't. Wow, we're rumbling the floor now. Even if you don't have the traditional parents, that's such a great thing to mind because of that tension between I knew who I want to be, but this is who everybody's telling me to be.
Yeah, like Kiersten, I didn't have orphans. I had a boarding school, though. So that's just another way. That's why there are so many YA boarding school books, because we're just go away from your parents. They're not there. I always joke that parents get in the way of our big I don't let my kid ride his bike down the street by himself. He certainly can't defeat the Dark Lord. That's not happening. That sounds really dangerous. I don't have a helmet for that one. So yeah, that's part of it. But at the same time, I also was very interested in those parental relationships for exactly what Kiersten was saying, that as you're a teenager, your parents are a huge part of your life, whether you like it or not sometimes. And so I think that one thing I also really did a lot of the time was like involve the parents in things. So like in the Hex Hall series, her parents are gone in the first book, but man, in the second book, she's got to deal with both of them and what turns out to be their big secret that has led to her existence. In the Rebel Belle series, it was harder because I didn't want to involve the parents so much, but I needed to also because my editor is always like, where are her parents? Where are they? Are they doing things? Is the door locked? What's happening? And then also I gave her a sister who had passed away in a drunk driving accident because I wanted her to really feel this responsibility towards her parents. Like, oh, I've got superpowers and I have to do all these dangerous things, but if something bad happens to me, I've already watched them lose a child and I can't do that to them again. So it was another way too of adding drama, of adding conflict, and of adding higher stakes, you know, that people are gonna be really sad if I die is I think a good higher stakes thing, and parents can be really good for that too.
I also killed all of the parents in my books. I like literally
We're
not
so
just my main
bloodthirsty.
character. Spoiler alert. Not just my main character's parents, but literally like all of them. And for me, it was personally because I wanted to give the main character and the rest of her coven, like they had to depend on themselves. They had to step up. It makes it so much more harrowing that they have no one to tell them that they have to get up on time, tell them what to do. Like they actually have to stand on their own 2 feet. I don't kill off all of the parents. I had great parents, by the way. I didn't kill them off. But you know, sometimes, I don't know, I think that the absence of a parent, even if the parent was there but kind of absent, I think that what that does is it forces the characters to grow up faster than they need to and really forces them to take care of themselves.
I think we have time for one more. You had one right here.
I was going to ask the kind of stereotypical, well-meaning but bumbling or incompetent male in their foil. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Tina earlier, Zena Japs are there.
Well, we talked about Xander as well.
So is that going away, or is that, you had mentioned the 100 and basically you've gotten rid of all of that history. If you're going to have a female heroine, the male has to be especially bumbling or nobody would believe the woman was
Which isn't, all the men are just as capable as the women. It's just, it's totally equal. You know, I did read a review recently, which I shouldn't have, but I did, and it said, it said something along the lines of her boy characters are never as well developed as her girl characters, and I was like, oh yeah, they're always. Because you know, I'd like to think I write really well developed, interesting, multifaceted girl characters, and sometimes I don't write my boys as well because it's hard when you're writing the love interest, because you know there's sort of those checklist dreamy things, but making them a person beyond that can be difficult. But again, I think you come to the same thing that you come with all supporting characters is they need to complement and they also need to challenge the main character. My other problem with writing for teens is I always want the boys to be boys that I would want my young daughter to have a crush on. I'm like, no, don't go for the brooding one who's mean to you. That doesn't mean he loves you. Look at this nice boy who treats you well. Isn't that exciting? Sometimes I have to turn my mom off in order to be able to write. Also, my kids are never allowed to be YA heroes or heroines because I don't want to die. But yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's the same challenge that you see in writing anything. And like you said, you try not to default to the easy things, like I was saying with the mean girl thing earlier. There are those sort of tropes, and you can default for them very easily because those are the stories that you've been given, and that sometimes you see yourself reflecting. And so it's always important, I think, to ask why. Why with everything? Why is this character the race that they are? Why is this character the gender that they are? Why does this character have this trait or this trait? As long as your choices are deliberate, and for a reason, then I think that you'll do a good job. I hope.
I think that is a fabulous note to end on. Before we go, there are a couple things I want to mention. There is a group signing after this, I think in about half an hour, in the sales pavilion. That's the big open area over here with all of these lovely ladies. And I wanted to ask everyone to sort of go down the line and say where people can find you online, and if you have anything else at Comic-Con that you want to promote. You can find me at heroinecomplex.com. That's the name of my novel coming out next year, which stars Asian American superheroines like Valerie. I wanted to write heroines who look like me. And you can find me on Twitter at Sarah Kuhn, which I don't know why my name tag's over there for some reason, but go ahead.
You can find me at thebookslayer.com. Clearly, I was not impacted at all by Joss Whedon and Buffy. And actually, the book that I'm working on right now is directly inspired by Buffy. But when I was watching Buffy and everything, my thing was always like, I would be a really good hero, but wait, I'm fearful of everything and don't have superpowers and can't do anything. So this book is focuses completely on the everyday hero, people that can actually train to be heroes in everyday life, no superpowers needed. So I've been actually doing all the training that my characters are going to do, and I'm really excited about that because if you're like me and have always wanted to be a superhero, there is training that you can do out there, and hopefully you guys will be able to read about it.
You can find me at valerietejeda.com, and I have my book Hollywood Witch Hunter coming out July 20th, and during the signing I'll have books and stuff to give away, so I'm really excited, and some special trading card swag.
Nice. You can find me at KierstenWhite.com. I'm also sometimes on Twitter, all the time, at Kiersten White. Very easy. My next book is called And I Darken. It comes out next year, and it's actually a gender-swapped Vlad the Impaler historical. Made him a girl, like you do, you know? That's because I don't write boys well, apparently.
I, too, don't spend a lot of time on Twitter like Kiersten.
Never.
And I'm Rae Carson at Twitter, except squished together. My next book is called Walk on Earth, a Stranger.
It's so good.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's about a girl who dresses as a boy during the California Gold Rush so that she can go across the country in a covered wagon and flee bad people, and it's cool.
I am the real Lady Hawkins on Tumblr.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm Lady Hawkins. I'm very fancy, obviously. I've been ennobled. I'm Lady Hawkins on Twitter and Instagram. My next book coming out is the third book in the Rebel Belle series. And I'm actually signing tomorrow at 1 at the Penguin booth, and they will be giving away free copies of Rebel Belle, which is the first book in that series. So if you're like, hey, she seemed cool, I'd like to read her book, but I don't want to pay money for it, you are so sad. Just go get a ticket tomorrow morning and then come get a free book signed. So you can check that out. Yeah.
Excellent, and thank you so much for coming today.